The game's up, Scarlet. There are no more bullets left in that gun.
Oh, come on. You don't think I'm going to fall for that old trick?
It's not a trick. There was one shot at Mr. Body in the study, 2 for the chandelier, 2 at the lounge door, and 1 for the singing telegram.
That's not 6.
1 plus 2 plus 2 plus 1.
There was only one shot that got the chandelier. That's 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1.
Even if you were right, that would be 1 plus 1 plus 2 plus 1, not 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 1.
Okay, fine. 1 plus 2 plus 1. Shut up!
Welcome back to another 80s podcast. I'm your host, Whit, and I really appreciate you joining me. Today, we're going to be talking about the classic 1985 whodunit Clue. As I mentioned in the last episode, this is just one of those uber comfortable movies I can pretty much watch at any time. For a darkish 80s comedy, it's still light and just hits so many notes for me. But we're not just going to hear my unchallenged opinions today. Nope. We have a guest in the form of my good friend, Fran. Fran, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
This is going to be great because you've also already helped on the technological side where I've continued with my streak of not having sound work the way I'd like.
Yeah, as long as it's working, I helped. If it's not, I had nothing to do with it. So
yeah, having denial, I think is, the ability to deny things, I think is important in any relationship. So let's hop right in here. When did you first see Clue?
That's a great question. I was approximately 1 year old when Clue was released in the theater, so it definitely wasn't then. I think I saw it sometime mid-high school. I had a friend group that was a little bit older, had grown up with a lot of 80s movies and introduced me to a lot of these things. So the first real time I can remember watching it, I was probably 16 or 17 at a friend's house, and it came up. I had never seen it before, and it was one of those moments where everybody said, okay, sit down, shut up. You have to watch it right now.
Yeah, and that's something where you are about 10 years younger than me. So certainly our viewings of it are going to be a little bit different. So tell me a little bit more about that. So I guess it's roughly, 2000?
Yeah, just around 2000, 2001, probably. It's interesting in talking to you about the other topics on the podcast and just, your love of the 80s. I have a weird nostalgia for the 80s, but most of it's through the lens of I was introduced to a lot of this stuff when I got older, and didn't live through it the first time, really. I mean, I was born in the 80s, but how much could I really remember other than cartoons? So when you're ready for Saturday morning cartoons in the late 80s, I am right on board and ready. But for something like this, I got introduced to a lot of these actors in different roles, and this wasn't my first introduction to a lot of these people. And for some it was. I mean, for one very specific one, it was the first time I'd really seen Tim Curry in anything. So
okay. Yeah, we're obviously going to talk about him a bit there, but that's one of the important things of just this podcast project in general. I'm not looking for people to have the same memories or, as you said, seeing things through the same lens as me. So
yeah.
This is always good. So I have to ask, in the year 2000, what are you watching it on? I assume we're past VHS tapes. Were we looking at
VHS?
DVDs? Oh, really?
Still VHS. I had a friend that had a copy on VHS, and so we watched it there. It may have been cable now that I just said that, but I do remember distinctly a friend having a VHS copy of it.
It's funny. I wish I could say I saw Clue in the theater. I would have been 11 at the time, but I did not see it. I saw it on VHS basically my parents had one set of friends that had kids our age, and they were the Kirbys, and we went over there. I remember it being kind of not an event, that probably is overselling it, but I do remember the Kirbys being somewhat clever about the whole thing where they had the game there and they actually took out the sheets of paper that had everything so we could actually kind of play along and kind of come up with our own
that's
idea.
really cool.
Yeah. So it was a nice effect. And I'd heard that being done. I don't know if it was originally their ideas, but I remember video stores back in the 80s recommending that you do that it was supposed to be kind of interactive.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had played the game, I don't want to say a lot, but I definitely played the game a few times before I had ever seen the movie. And so I was probably the right age for look at all of the things from the game that they shoved into a movie. Like I can recognize all of these things, and I feel like a lot of the movie to me is here are these Easter eggs or inside jokes that had you never played the board game before, you might not understand. And having played it at that point, it was interesting to just see how they made all that fit.
And I think, well, not I think, I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the screenplay and everything like that, but I think you just gave us a good segue. You can't have the movie Clue without the board game Clue. Or
Yeah,
a little bit of history here. What was originally called Cluedo. It was
Cluedo.
released in the UK in 1949. This is probably information you have. I did not know it myself. I don't know how many of the listeners will.
I found that out last night, actually.
I beat you by like 24 hours.
Perfect.
That's about it. But I'll just give a little synopsis here. The goal of the game is to figure out, for anybody who's never played it or seen the movie, is figure out who killed the victim, where the crime occurred, and what weapon was used. Each player takes on the role of one of 6 suspects and works to uncover the truth by moving strategically around a mansion-themed game board with 9 rooms, gathering clues, and figuring out who the murderer was among the other players. The name of the victim in the original one, as you've probably already read, was Dr. Black. Once released in the US, the victim's name was changed to Mr. Body with 2 Ds, to be clear. Fran, I think it's fair to say you've played way more games than me, know more about games than me. Are you a fan of this game?
I do like it. It's funny, I have not played it in 20 years, give or take. It's been a long time. It's funny, preparing for the episode, like I did all this research. When you asked me about it, I realized I have an unopened version of the board game Clue in my house right now. So I've purchased it as an adult and haven't played it. I think we played at a friend's house at a game night, and my wife and I were like, "Oh, this game's really fun. You need at least 3 players for it to actually be interesting, though." So not a ton of opportunity to get people to come over and play Clue.
Yeah, that does make a difference. Like we have 2 kids, so that makes it a little bit easier. Even
Sure,
though
yeah, you can just bribe them into doing stuff for you.
as they get older, that happens a little bit less frequently,
Sure,
or the cost becomes too great to get that bribe in the first place. But you're right. When they're younger, it's just like, hey, we're all playing a game together. Is there
right.
anything unique about this game compared to others? I have a couple of thoughts on my own there.
Yeah, I think that, I play a lot of games that would be considered strategy games, I think. But with Clue, the deduction side of it is like a really interesting mechanic. And you had mentioned about having the sheets of paper for the game where you're basically solving a logic puzzle as you play the game, and it becomes a game of deduction. More than a board game. It's can I follow along what's happening, understand what clues I'm being given based off of other players' actions, and then be good at having hunches. So it's cool that way.
I like how you're putting that, like, because you're right. There's a lot of hunches. It's not like playing Monopoly where there's things happening. And just in case there's some serious Monopoly players out there, I'm not insulting you. Maybe there are other things that I just don't know about playing the game Monopoly. It's not one of my favorite games, but most of the action is really on the board. It's not the hunches or deductions you're making. And that kind of leads me to, I have kind of 2 favorite parts of the game. One is, like you said, with those sheets of paper, you're sitting there and you're concealing information that you have
Yeah.
that other players don't. And I have to admit, it gives me a little bit of feeling this is more mysterious because I have to hide this from you. Like when I do things, like when I was checking off, okay, I don't think it's that character. I didn't do it over it. I'd move my pencil to a part where I'm like, okay, you can't see where exactly, you can't figure out who I'm checking off here. Like that sort of thing made a difference.
Yeah. And, I try to use chess as sort of a baseline when I talk about games in general. And I'm going to get nerdy for a minute, but I use chess as a baseline of skill in a game, right? If you take 2 players and put them in front of a chessboard and one of them is a higher rated chess player than the other one, they're going to win every time. It's deterministic in a lot of cases.
Mhm.
In a game like Clue, you can just guess and get it right. And it doesn't matter how much you've been paying attention or how good you are at deducing things. but there is sort of a game inside the game. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but I remember once playing in my teens where we played with somebody that would specifically mark off the wrong things on his paper, but leave it available for other people to see.
Mm-hmm.
So he was leading people down the wrong path. And like in his head was basically had a sheet in his head that he was memorizing. Okay, here are the actual clues. And then he would put fake clues on the paper to try to get people thinking in the wrong direction.
That is a great point, because I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think that is, as you put it, kind of the game within the game. Because I would say in this game, you can bluff. And I like games where you can bluff. For instance, you already mentioned you're obviously trying to determine at the end, this person was putting fake information out. Hopefully somebody would be sneaky, read it, and then go the wrong direction. Because there's two elements to the game. There's suggestions and there's accusations. The suggestions, you can kind of do what you want and you don't get penalized. But if you make the wrong accusation, you're out of the game. And I think that was kind of one of the things that probably people that get used to the game is you're making false suggestions where there's three categories you're trying to nail here. But let's say you have Professor Plum in your hand. You might still be indicating, I'm going to suggest it's him, knowing that you have it because people have incomplete information, hoping that somebody makes an incorrect accusation at the end and knocks themselves out of the game. Which, because when you think about it, if you somehow trick everybody, and this would be difficult to do, to make false accusations or the wrong ones, they could all get knocked out. You wouldn't even know who the winner is, and you could win by default.
Oh, yeah. I think there's a lot that you can do in this game to not necessarily win, but make other people lose.
And I think that's kind of cool because you're right. It's not like chess where it's always going to be the strongest player. I think you can have different attributes and still win. And I think that's kind of cool because I don't want it to be like a game show where every round becomes greater amounts of points and suddenly the person who did best in the last round is just more probable to win. But I do like the idea that there's somebody who's super observant. Okay, that's helpful for this sort of game. If you have somebody who just acts like a wild card, they can kind of make it a different game.
That's exactly right.
Obviously, like I said before, you can't have a Clue the movie without Clue the game. So I thought this would be a good time to talk about the origin of the movie itself. From the research I did, it sounds like Deborah Hill, a pretty famous producer, got the rights around 1981. Are you familiar with Deborah Hill?
I'm not.
She was a pretty big producer in the 80s, still was producing in the 90s. She died at a pretty early age, I think in the early 2000s, the age of like 54 or something like that. But most people who know Deborah Hill, they know her mostly for being the partner in crime to John Carpenter. So you're thinking Halloween, The Fog, Escape from New York, things like that, where I kind of pigeonholed her because I thought I knew her pretty well. When I saw that she was somebody involved with Clue, it just didn't make sense. It just seems like, she's the one who's out there bird dogging the rights to Clue. I kind of assumed back then that she just primarily worked in horror.
I just want to shoehorn this in there. Deborah Hill, famously from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And went to Temple University.
Temple is a pretty good film program, right?
She had a degree in sociology and statistics from Temple. So obviously you just immediately turn that into a film career.
It's kind of like me with history and insurance. They just go together.
Just like peanut butter and jelly.
Exactly. And I'm assuming, I don't know if this is true or not, but I think it's the first game that was fully made into a movie where that was the intention.
Yep, that is correct. It was the first fully based on a board game movie ever made. I did learn that in my research.
Because I can think of a couple others. I know there was a Battleship movie, and I think there was some Candyland animated series, but I don't think Jumanji was ever a real game. I think it's a game now, but I think that was the opposite order, right?
Yep, that's correct. And I can't think of any other, off the top of my head, I can't think of any. Like you said, there is a Battleship movie. Yeah, it was very unique in that way. It was also unique in that it bombed in the theater. But here we are talking about it 40 years later. So
a detective has to be observant. cautious, and cool. When you play Clue, you have to figure out who did it. There are suspects, weapons, and scenes for a crime.
Mr. Green did it in the study with a knife. I got a clue card. I know. It was Miss Scarlet in the conservatory with a candlestick. Wow! Elementary, my dear Betsy.
Clue from Parker Brothers.
So Deborah Hill secures the rights, and at some point it gets to John Landis, who was meant to direct. When I think of John Landis, what comes to mind to you? Like, what are the first few movies you're thinking of?
I'm going to say it because I know to cater to my audience. I think of Spies Like Us, but also I feel like, did he do Animal House? Am I making that up?
That's
okay.
right.
Yeah. I could probably, with a gun to my head, name some others, but I feel like anything that he's done, I've loved. Maybe not everything, but
yeah, he had a very, very strong late 70s and early 80s. He did Trading Places, Coming to America. I think he was the Blues Brothers as well.
Yeah, I think it was the Blues Brothers.
Those are the main ones I know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so Landis starts writing a screenplay because he was a writer as well. He has to recruit other writers along the way because I got some quotes for him where basically, this is a quote, he said, "I set up a crime I couldn't solve. So I thought, well, I got to get a real writer." So he really wanted to do it, but apparently he couldn't get to the point of, well, what is the actual mystery and how am I going to end this film? So now we're going to enter Jonathan Lynn. I had never heard of his name or recalled it. Were you familiar with him at all before you did any research or anything like that?
Nope.
What do you know about him now?
That he worked on Clue, and that's about it. No, I think that I'm trying to think. The little bit of research I did, part of this was I didn't want to do a ton of research and then show up and be a know-it-all about the topic. But he was involved in, I want to say, My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah, he directed
one
My
of the
Cousin
movies
Vinny
that he worked on. Yeah, those are the two that I think it's Clue and My Cousin Vinny that come to mind.
And I think that's what it would be for most people. Like, I don't think most people would actually know who he is at all. And that's not a shot at the guy, but I seem to have a decent handle on 80s directors or 80s and 90s where I saw most movies, at least in the theater. And yeah, when I saw the name, it did not hit me. But as clearly we know now, he is the one that's going to be heading at least the screenplay at this juncture of the podcast here. A couple other movies he directed were The Distinguished Gentleman with Eddie Murphy. That's the one where he becomes a senator, I believe. And Nuns on the Run. That's a movie that starred Eric Idle and Robbie Coltrane. It was actually pretty good.
Gotcha.
But I not only didn't know him, but I was surprised he was British. And for like a moment, my American brain went, hey, why is this British guy directing Clue, which is an American classic? Then during this research, I realized the game was British. And I told myself I should probably just shut up.
I think that's fair.
I just would not have guessed it. That's just like the Americanization of my brain. But at that point, Landis had done a whole bunch of filming in London and England for a couple different movies. And he had seen this show in Britain called Yes, Minister, which I guess was a pretty popular political satire in England. And it was directed by Lynn. And Landis believed he'd be somebody who could write a pretty clever script for Clue. I read a few articles about how Lynn was approached and everything like that, but it seems like he thought the idea of Clue as a movie screenplay, it seems like he thought it was pretty silly, but it was an interesting challenge. One of the challenges, I guess, he thought was, okay, I've got to incorporate this game into the movie. And I know when people make a movie, from my limited information, that there's limits of what you can and can't do. There's some restrictions, many of them put upon you by the studio. But I guess I don't know if I've ever heard of anything like that before this, where, by the way, whatever you do with this movie script, remember there's this game here that is kind of directionally needs to be true. When you hear something like that, how much of a problem would you think that would be? Or is that something you think that'd be kind of fun?
You know, it's interesting because Clue's the kind of game where there's no background, right? Like, or very little background. It's just here are characters. You have to solve this murder, one of these people did it. They used one of these weapons. It happened in one of these rooms. That's not an hour and 40-minute comedy in my head,
Mhm.
So, and if you think about other types of games, I don't know if there's another board game where, if I said to you, Wit, go grab Scrabble and write a screenplay. I don't think it hits the same way. Like maybe Monopoly, where there's like a character that you can sort of base it around. But that's one of the reasons that I'm so fascinated by it, because I do love games, and it is so unique in that they literally just said, here's all of the locations and proper nouns that you're allowed to use. Go have a good time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it works. And it doesn't feel like playing Clue until the endings, really, where there's like accusations being hurled wildly around, but it's still a great film outside of that. If I didn't know that it was based on a board game, it doesn't change how much I like the movie.
Yeah, and I don't think it should either. Like it's something where we need to separate the two, because it's not just a playing out of the board game. But as I did more research and thought more about it, something I didn't do as a kid, I was like, oh, Clue, it's a movie now. Got it. But that does seem like a pretty crazy idea with, as you said, the limited background, because when you read about what Lynn did to figure it out, that was the thing Landis couldn't figure out. He's like, okay, there's all these people here, just like in the game, but why are they here? Why does this make sense? So I think Lynn deserves a ton of credit here, because he's the one who kind of made the names aliases, because in the board game, the character names have to do more with the color of the pieces than anything else. Like they didn't really have that much of a point in the actual mystery. But in the actual script, that's where Lynn decided, well, these people, they have something to hide. And with his history of being in movies, obviously, even though he's from England, he's still part of Hollywood. He had been over to this country many times, worked on a couple other things. Being part of the movie industry originally, he was also an actor earlier in his career. He apparently knew many older people who were part of Hollywood in the 50s, in the middle of the Red Scare and McCarthyism.
Yeah.
He apparently took those conversations, those feelings he had expressed to him from people he knew about being blackballed for real or imagined associations with communists or socialists. It was a time where trust was maybe at an all-time low, except for maybe now. Who knows, depending on your point of view.
Yeah.
But this was especially true back then for people who had relationships with the government. They worked with the government. They knew people who worked for the government. So Lynn thought, why not have a dinner party where the guests were all blackmail victims with everything to lose due to their not entirely above board relationships with the government? I think that's pretty clever all around.
Yeah, I think so too. And the flip side of this is, and I haven't done it yet, but I would be interested in it, playing the board game Clue with that in mind. Like, this is why this mystery is happening. Kind of gives you this different, okay, we're not just sitting down to play a game. There's this deeper story that does exist because the movie is a known quantity now. Does that make the game more interesting? You're now making the fourth, fifth, sixth endings to the movie as you play through.
That is a really interesting point of view. That should, because I haven't played the game since I started really taking a look into this. I wonder if that kind of does change the color of it. That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So back to Lynn, and one of the other things he had to accomplish with the script was the climax, or the hitch, depending on your point of view, was that the movie had to have originally 4 different endings. That was reduced to 3 after Lynn felt that the 4th ending just wasn't up to stuff. Landis and Paramount really felt the idea of having multiple endings would be a game changer, and it was, just not in the way they thought. We'll get to that a little bit later in the episode. When it comes time to make the movie, like a good mystery, the unexpected happens. It took Lynn about 6 months to write the script after he and Landis had gotten together and everybody seemed to be rowing in the right direction. 6 months sounds pretty reasonable, I should say, but not necessarily in Hollywood's eyes. Landis decided to move away from the project and do another 1985 project, which you already mentioned, Spies Like Us, starring Chevy Chase and Dan Aykroyd. Real quick, what did you think of that movie?
You're going to be sad,
Oh,
and I apologize. I've never seen all of it. I don't know if I've seen 10 minutes of that movie overall in my life.
it's funny. I'm not sad. It's just something where I'm overlaying my childhood where it seemed like it was on all the time. But yeah, I don't know how often it's on
I
now. I don't have regular TV anymore.
I think that a big part of my recollection, I say recollection, or nostalgia for things that happened in the 80s came late 90s, early 2000s, or later for some of this stuff. And a lot of it would be talking to friends and saying, like, oh, I've never seen that. And then getting incredulous stares and like, okay, we have to plan to do this quickly so that we can rectify this. So Spies Like Us is just one that, I've never gotten back to watch. I do like that I've seen like other John Landis stuff. It made me realize John Landis directed Three Amigos, which I love. Also a great 80s movie.
Oh, I had not thought about that or forgotten about that one at least.
Yeah. So Spies, I thought that I remembered that you like Spies Like Us, which is why I threw that out there as my things that John Landis has worked on. But I should have stuck to Animal House, Three Amigos, which are what I actually have in my head for what he's done.
Well, there's still time to do Spies Like Us, and I would say without giving too much away, not that the plot of Spies Like Us is amazing or anything like that, but I can tell you it did significantly better financially in the theater, which was probably better for Landis. The thing that might have stung a bit to Lynn was Spies Like Us, the movie that John Landis moved to direct, was released a week after Clue, very much probably cutting into its chances
Yeah.
of being successful. So that probably took a bite out of its ticket sales.
Yeah.
Good news for Lynn is when Landis left, Lynn was basically moved in to take the directing role. So
Right.
not the end of the world. At least he got something pretty significant out of it. Let's talk about the marketing of the movie back in 1985. I know you weren't alive back then, or actually you were alive, but only like one.
Barely.
That's true. I think one of the things you do know is when the three separate endings, because they eliminated the fourth, came out, each ending was sent to a different theater. That sounds like just a pretty big money making, like a cash grab for Paramount in this case. But I grew up in Westchester. So there was two movie theaters kind of in the area, both Eric movie theaters. So technically one would have gotten one. The other one would have gotten another ending. And I don't know where the third ending would be, but supposedly, from what I read, one theater gets one ending. This left all sorts of problems because you didn't know what ending you were going to get.
Right.
You went and saw it. You could go to another theater. Technically, if they're close by, it was done strategically. You should be able to see one of the other endings, but you didn't know which one you're going to get. So this left some movie theaters apparently doing their own advertising where they gave hints about what they were going to see because they didn't want people to kind of go, well, I'm gambling to see a movie here where I don't even know what I'm getting. That's one of the problems with what Paramount and Landis were coming up with is they had this idea of people will want to see this movie multiple times, which as a gimmick does seem kind of crazy. Like, is that something you would ever do?
Yeah, 100%. So
Really?
I can tell you when I was in my early 20s, I worked in a comic book store and the owner and I had started tossing around this idea of fortune cookie t-shirts where you'd get it in the package of a fortune cookie, but you wouldn't know what was on the shirt when you bought it. And the idea of, okay, this is going to be random. Like it goes to, I play collectible card games and I buy packs of cards and I have no idea what's going to go in there. Part of the fun is it's a lottery ticket, right? I could get the good ending. I could get the good ending every time I go see the movie. This is awesome. Not that there's an ending to me that's better than the others because I haven't seen it in a theater ever. Like I've never just seen one ending. Every time I've watched it, I get all three endings every time. But putting myself in that headspace, I would have loved if I saw it the first time and I liked it. Yeah, we're driving 20 minutes to another theater. Let's hope we get another ending. Or we get the same ending and now we have to go find a third theater. Like I am the target audience, 100%.
I'm impressed that you'd be willing to go to that lengths because I guess one of the things that throws me off, well, there's a few things. One being that it's only the ending that changes. So the first hour and 15 roughly is probably all the same. Like there isn't much changing. It's just the ending. Or even, and this is my adult brain thinking, I don't know if I'd be willing to do that. But I'm also thinking back then, like if I got my parents to take me to see Clue in 85, and then we went there and I'm like, oh my God, there's two other endings here. The chances are slim to none that I get convinced one of them to take me out again and then possibly a third time. It's just hard for me to imagine them ever going for something like that and a whole bunch of other parents thinking likewise.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. I also, it's interesting not knowing that Paramount only released one ending to each theater. I almost feel like it should have been every theater got every ending and they just had different show times. Just randomize it. You know what I mean? Like, just send them all the same third reel or fourth reel, whatever it would have been. And, the noon show is ending one, the 2 o'clock show is ending two, the 4 o'clock show is ending three, and then it's different the next day. You know what I mean? So there's still a chance you're not gonna know. If I go at noon this week, I'll definitely see ending two or whatever it is. But at the same time, access to going to the movies was like actually a thing in the 80s. Like now I have a movie theater down the street from my house. And unless it's something that I really can't wait to see, I'll just watch it at home. Like the experience of going to the movies is different even than when I was in my teens. So I don't know now if I would go to 3 different movie theaters to see 3 different endings necessarily. I'd just wait. I'd wait for it to come out on DVD. Stream.
That's a great point that you made, that seeing movies back then was a different sort of event. Like the movie theaters themselves were different.
Yeah.
How many movies you saw in a year because you only had so many movies you'd be able to see at home, especially if it was before most people had VCRs. But yeah, that's the weirdest thing about this, is that a whole bunch of executives, and executives make poor decisions all the time, because the tagline was, when they were advertising and their marketing, it was, "Who done it depends on where you see it." My dad would have been like, what the hell are they talking about? I'm not going all over God's green earth to figure out the real ending to this movie. Like that's pretty much what he would have said.
Yeah.
It seems like a decent amount of other people felt the same way.
Yeah, I mean, based on the box office, that probably is what happened. I think it was I feel this way about a lot of, I would consider Clue a cult classic. I feel this way about a lot of cult movies. A lot of times they're just ahead of their time. I think if this comes out in like 2004, where there's multiplexes all over the place, where you could have said, hey, like I grew up, the closest big movie theater for us was Neshaminy. If you went to the Neshaminy 24, there's 3 screens showing Clue, and each one has a different ending at the same time. And then you could be right there. And if you really love the movie, you could watch it 3 times in a day and see all 3 of them. And it isn't somewhere like the Colonial Theater where there's a screen and you have to wait a day or 2 to see the other ending if you were going to do it that way. Or to your point, there's 2 different theaters 20 minutes apart where you have to go different places to see it. I think it just was part of the multiple endings is one of the best parts of this movie to me, that they went to the trouble of, hey, there's a lot of ways this could have ended, much like the game Clue. We're going to film a bunch of them. And that was cool. I think it didn't resonate the way with everybody that I think that it resonates with me.
Clearly they hit some people, thought it was really cool. And I think everybody who rented a videotape or saw it on Prime, like I just watched recently, appreciate the 3 endings. But that's really smart what you mentioned about the multiplexes. Like even if the movie company, even if Paramount said, hey, by the way, we'll cut you a deal here. We'll give you all 3. As I mentioned earlier, the Eric theaters that I saw in Westchester and Concordville, they each only had 2 movie theaters. If somebody said to them, oh, wait, you're going to give me the same movie kind of, and I'm going to take up 2 screens, the movie theater would be kind of crazy to take it. They'd be like, no, I'll just do this one over here, and I'll sell a completely different movie over here because I'd like to make the biggest profit possible.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. So that's why I think the timing of, hey, there's this cool thing where there's multiple endings. It fits more. And this goes to the history, I think, of movie theaters. We went from 1 screen, 2 screen theaters to big multiplexes, and now that's even going away. They're not as popular as they used to be. So sometime in that late 90s, early 2000s, land where, you did have 24 screens showing movies, it would be easier to, that's an easier pitch where you say, hey, we're going to dedicate 3 screens to this movie for, even if it's just a week that we're going to do this. And then the rest of the time it's in one theater, we're just going to randomize it. You have no idea what ending we're going to show because we don't even know until we get there.
That would have been a different take for sure.
Yeah.
But it was just something special about this movie. And clearly, other than just making a movie out of a board game, there's other things going on here. One other thing that happened early in 1985, before they actually released this movie, there was actually a Clue VCR game that was released, I think it was like a few months before the movie came out.
Okay.
But basically, rather than playing around a board, it was an hour-long video showing kind of funny scenes. I think it was called At the Body Mansion, where on your VHS or beta tape, you could gather clues. There was multiple murders. You'd match them up with your cards. Instead of having 9 rooms, I think there was something like 5 rooms, different weapons and something like that. But apparently did pretty well. It sold like 500,000 copies. So that's pretty strong for back then.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that we had mentioned this before. If you're thinking of a board game now that you would turn into a movie, Clue's as good as any other choice. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I do like that there were very specific things that they did with it that made people like it as much as they did. Because to me, it is one of the funnier movies from the 1980s, to me.
It has a different feel to it, and we'll talk about that because we'll get in the actual movie other than just kind of what led up to it. Before we do that, though, let's talk about the players, and by that, I mean the cast. Wherever you research, or even if you look on videos, Clue is always referred to as an ensemble cast, which it is. I think for me, it might be my favorite ensemble cast movie, and for reasons that I'll kind of mention at the end here. But what I'd like to do is this. I'm going to go over the main players plus Tim Curry.
Yep.
And I'm curious, when you thought of these people, who did you think of before you had seen the movie? So for instance, I know you mentioned Tim Curry. This might have been the first time you had ever seen him.
Really, so it's funny because I talked to my wife about this last night. My first real Tim Curry experience was Home Alone 2. Maybe like I was the right age for that movie when it came out. And like, oh, who's this stuffy guy in the hotel? And then growing up and you see movies like Legend and Clue and Rocky Horror, like, wait a minute, I had the wrong impression of who this person was.
His range was a bit different.
Yeah, well, and Tim Curry, it always makes me laugh that if I had a nickel for every time Tim Curry was in a giant mansion as basically the de facto narrator of a movie, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
I think that's a good one to start off on that because, that's kind of what I'm going for here. Because for me, when I think Tim Curry, probably what I saw or thought at the time was, even though I hadn't seen all of Rocky Horror Picture Show, I knew he was in it. These actors aren't A-listers. They're hardworking, professional actors, but most of these people weren't headliners. So that's kind of curious. What did you think of them at the time when you first saw it? Like, what did it remind you of? So I'll go on to the next one. I'm just doing these after Tim Curry, I'm just kind of doing them in alphabetical order here. Madeline Kahn. So when you first saw this, who were you thinking of?
Madeline Kahn, who I had a huge crush on, you mean? Because I saw it later, I had seen Blazing Saddles first. So always Blazing Saddles, probably Clue second.
And I probably should go backward here. Tim Curry, Wadsworth the Butler, Madeline Kahn, Mrs. White. For me, for Madeline Kahn, I would have done the same thing. Blazing Saddles or Young Frankenstein. That would
Frankenstein.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the correction.
I'm so glad you set me up for that.
It's funny, like even though you said it right afterwards, I said it in Gene Wilder's voice.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny too because I saw that movie much later. I saw Young Frankenstein for the first time 3 or 4 years ago. Like it's just it's something that I had missed. Same with Rocky Horror. I watched Rocky Horror both at Halloween. I saw Rocky Horror for the first time in its entirety this most recent Halloween. So I'd never seen, like, I was aware that Tim Curry was in it. I knew the plot points. I'm culturally aware of the movie, but I just never sat down and watched the whole thing. So it's funny that the last two movies that I've watched with Tim Curry are Rocky Horror and Clue, and both in the last 6 months. But yeah.
Next on our list, we got Christopher Lloyd as Professor Plum. So when you first saw this, when you saw him or kind of realized, okay, this guy's in it, what were you thinking of his work?
Always, always Back to the Future. And now a little bit like Addams Family.
Oh, okay.
As Fester, like he was, again, it's interesting because I don't think that that's the most famous thing that he's done necessarily, but a lot of my first impressions of these, I can't wait to get to Martin Mull, by the way. But a lot of my first impressions are not the things that they're most well known for. I think in hindsight, it's Back to the Future. It's Taxi a little bit now, you know what I mean? But I didn't grow up with those things necessarily. It's just as an adult, I've gone back and watched some stuff.
And that makes sense because since I saw it a year later, I don't know whether I saw Clue or Back to the Future first because I didn't see Back to the Future in the theater, unfortunately. But even at that point, even though I love Back to the Future, I still would have thought of Christopher Lloyd as Reverend Jim from Taxi because that had been on for like 5 years, and I think it was off the air at that point. But I've probably watched almost every episode of that, so that's who I would have associated him with.
And it's funny thinking about these people in hindsight, stuff that they would have been more famous for. And to your point, that it wasn't a group of A-listers as an ensemble. It was a bunch of people that had been working in Hollywood for a long time and or trying to get into Hollywood for a long time, and then have these like longer character actor careers afterwards. But for this film specifically, it just worked.
That is exactly the best way to put it. It just worked. And that is not always the case. Like, this isn't a Lifetime movie where we're taking kind of people that are way past their heyday and putting them together. It's just these people were in the middle of it and they all had really successful careers.
Yeah.
Next on the list, Michael McKean, Mr. Green.
Michael McKean's a weird one for me in that I missed some other stuff. So like Spinal Tap's a great answer. Mm-hmm. I've never seen all of Spinal Tap at the same time. It's one of those things where like I'm culturally aware of it and I quote it pretty regularly because some of it has just entered like the zeitgeist of human, I turn things up to 11 all the time. I just can't help it. But yeah, I think that I also think Better Call Saul now, like he's had some resurgence that way. Yeah. It's funny. I look at like people's IMDb's all the time and you look at the people in this movie and it's not like there weren't these huge blockbuster movies they were in, but they all have 50 to 100 credits. And that's a lot of stuff to be in. I remember Michael McKean was in the show Smallville, which I really loved, and played a character that I think that he did a great job with, but it was only for a couple episodes. So, it's that kind of thing where it's not somebody that I've seen in hundreds of things necessarily, but he's great in everything he does. And probably Spinal Tap for me. And now Better Call Saul, because he's got such a prominent role in that.
That's the type of reference where the Better Call Saul one, especially because he can do anything, where back then you would not have thought of him, Michael McKean, doing anything. Like at the time, it's like 86. What he was most known for, probably not just for myself, but for most people, was playing the role of Lenny in Laverne and Shirley, where he's pretty much a greaser goofball.
Right.
And I know he had done other things, but that was such a big show that was always in my mind. But now he's playing a very uptight government official, but he's also homosexual, where it's still a comedy though. But when you go to things like Better Call Saul, where it's dramatic, like he's done a ton of dramatic roles and he does them really well. Like his versatility just kept on expanding.
Yeah, for sure.
So let's get to the one you've been waiting for, Martin Mull.
This is like a perfect. I saw Martin Mull in something else before I saw him in Clue, and before I knew that he like could do stand up. Martin Mull played the principal in Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Oh, I did not know that.
And he was just like this kind of aloof high school principal who I never thought about being one, hilarious, or two, having the range that he had. He was just this character in a show that I was casually aware of because it came out in 98, I want to say.
That sounds right. I didn't watch it, but that sounds like the right time frame.
Don't mind me while I just Google everything under the sun. I think at 96 it might have started. So yeah, I would have been more aware of him in this, sitcom with Melissa Joan Hart than anything else he had done. And then I want to say, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Aristocrats, but I feel like he's in that and telling a joke. That's a much different movie.
I've heard about it, but I haven't seen it.
Yeah. And like between that and Clue, not realizing how hilarious he was a kind of a culture shock for me.
Yeah, he's somebody who, once again, he'd been around like in this late 70s. I remember him, I can't remember the name of the show in the mid 70s, but it was basically him as a host of a fictional talk show that was actually pretty good. But when I think of Martin Mull, I always think of Mr. Mom. It's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah.
He's kind of I don't want to say the villain, but as Mr. Richardson, who owns the advertising company, and just there's this one line that everybody knows where the main character Jack is pretending he's very, he's always busy. He basically says at one point to Mr. Richardson, to Martin Mull's character, he's working on stuff on the house, but he doesn't realize that Richardson's actually handy himself. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm going to rip down this wall, do all the electric. And Richard's like, yeah, you can make everything 220. And Michael Keaton, who plays Jack, is like, yeah, 220, 221, whatever it takes. And Martin Mull just has this great expression on his face. He's like, I can tell you're pretty handy, Jack. Always. That movie I love. But yeah, that was my first real experiencing of Martin Mull. And he's just solid. And lastly, we come of the main characters, I'll call them, Leslie Ann Warren, where I'm going to start off on this one because I knew her roughly, but I didn't at the time, I don't think, go, it's Leslie Ann Warren from X. I don't know if you had any different sort of feeling there.
I did not. And it's funny because, like I said, when I watched it most recently a couple of weeks ago, I'm like a chronic have IMDb up while I'm watching stuff. And even going through the first time, like I can't remember if she had been in anything that I would have been aware of or really paid attention to.
I know she was in plenty of other things, but just without me kind of, once again, overlaying, oh no, it's her from this, I don't think I would have picked that up at the time. But we might as well talk about this now. Leslie Ann Warren was not the original person cast. So
I'm so bummed out. We could have had Princess Leia as Miss Scarlet instead. And I don't know if it would have been a better movie, but I think it would have been a better movie.
And
I love Carrie Fisher so much. Yeah, I love Carrie Fisher so much. But even aside from like, I'm a giant Star Wars nerd and I love Carrie Fisher, like her work in Hollywood afterwards as like a script doctor and somebody that really understand where a movie was trying to get to. And she did a ton of behind the scenes stuff and she was just genuinely hilarious. I think that it probably doesn't change that the movie doesn't do great at the box office, but I think we get a much different performance in the movie for sure.
Oh yeah, I think it's definitely different as well. And unfortunately, for reasons that people could probably guess, she was supposed to be in the movie, but unfortunately she was in the middle of a pretty rough time in her life and was doing a stint in rehab.
Yep.
It just did not come to fruition there. Did you know that Tim Curry was not the original choice for Wadsworth?
I did, but I learned it like in the last 72 hours. So I didn't know that when I watched it most recently either. The funny thing is, I can't imagine anybody else as Wadsworth. And I meant to say this earlier when we talked about it being an ensemble cast. This is very much a Tim Curry movie to me. Mm-hmm. Like the more I watch it, it's Tim Curry and oh yeah, there's a bunch of guest stars. Because
he does the heavy lifting.
For sure. For sure. But I do know, I don't want to steal your thunder. I know who the famous other person that would have been the butler would have been. And I also think it would have been a different movie, but probably still hilarious.
And who would that have been? Hit me.
Rowan Atkinson.
And it's funny, he wasn't even the first choice. He was the second choice.
Yeah.
The first choice was a gentleman, I wish I could say I knew him, was Leonard Rossiter.
Yep.
Where I don't know him that well. I had to go back and look and see his scene from 2001. Apparently he was in Oliver as well. But I agree, like I really enjoy Rowan Atkinson. I liked him. I have to admit I wasn't a Mr. Bean fan. I was more of I'd rather watch Blackadder than I would
Yeah.
Mr. Bean.
I've seen like clips of Blackadder enough. I've seen enough clips that like at some point I'll probably have to sit down and watch it. Again, going back to I grew up in the age of having the internet at my fingertips as an adult. When I got curious about other things, I had the internet available to me. So being aware of Rowan Atkinson for a long time, he was in a movie called Rat Race, where he's not quite Mr. Bean, but you get a feeling for what he's like as an actor and how versatile he really is. I mean, he is a very funny guy. I think there's something about Tim Curry where I can't think of anybody else in that role.
Clearly, once you see it, it's really hard unless you don't like the performance or you don't like the movie. It's really difficult to kind of swap somebody in. And I think in this case, it's got to be him. Like Rowan Atkinson, I love, but it's just, I don't think it would have fit as well. I just don't think it would have.
I agree.
So we've got obviously not a ton of other characters here because most of this is taking place in the house. We've got Colleen Camp, plays Yvette. I know her more from a couple of the Police Academy movies. We've got Kelly Nakahara, which I didn't realize till my most recent viewing was in the show MASH as one of the nurses. I don't know if that ever crossed your mind.
Oh, I did not realize that.
Yeah. I was just looking at her and I said to my wife, I'm like, isn't she from MASH? And my wife knows MASH pretty well. And she's like, yeah, that is. And I'm like, oh, okay. I never would have guessed that. We've got Bill Henderson as the cop, which this is another thing I like. We've already got somebody in the mid 80s playing homosexual. I doubt there was many black cops running around in 1954. I'm just guessing.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And I know he's been in a million things. There wasn't anything particular as I was going through like his body of work that I had really seen or that stood out as something that he had been in for me.
It's funny. I know he's been in a good amount of things. The only thing that kind of stuck mainly where I was like City Slickers. I remember from City Slickers. Another, I guess, uninvited guest we have at some point in the movie is Jeffrey Kramer. Did you recognize him? He's the stranded motorist.
Yeah, is he in Jaws?
Yep, he is Deputy Hendricks.
Yeah. Yeah, so apparently I did recognize him. Who knew?
Yeah. And then, of course, we have the Hollywood mainstay playing Mr. Body, Lee Ving. And now we go to a special report from our punk rock correspondent, Al. Al, what do we need to know about Lee Ving?
Lee Ving, most famous for being the frontman of the punk rock band Fear that appeared in the initial decline of the Western civilization, is actually from Philadelphia. I don't know that most people know that because Fear is an LA-based punk rock band, but he was initially from Philadelphia, grew up in the Kensington area, which I think many of your listeners at least have heard of, if not been to. But yeah, Fear is a very influential band. In fact, they are still playing, still touring, and I think Mr. Ving is probably 70, early 70s now. But anyhow, they are probably most famous. He was buddies with John Belushi, and John Belushi apparently lobbied to get them on Saturday Night Live and ultimately was successful. They were on I think a Halloween show of Saturday Night Live. They played a couple songs. They brought a lot of their friends there and just created havoc when they were slam dancing or whatever they called it back then, stage diving. And I think they were promptly banned from appearing on Saturday Night Live again. I saw them once at City Gardens in Trenton, New Jersey with the Mentors and Bodies in Panic. I do remember that. But yeah, good band. I think they're actually playing at the Broken Goblet here soon in Bensalem, but unfortunately, I'm not able to make it. But, classic LA, California punk rock band.
All right. And with all the information you've just given us, why did Paramount Pictures choose Leaving to be in the movie Clue?
I have no idea, Whit.
And there you have it from our punk rock correspondent, Al. One of the things that I picked up while reading this, because the movie's fun. I think we agree it's a fun movie.
Yeah.
I'd read in an interview with Leslie Ann Warren, she just said how much fun it was, basically just constantly, even in between scenes. It's not like they all went back to their trailers or anything like that. It was just one of the most fun movies she'd ever been a part of. But she felt kind of bad because apparently some of the behavior in between was so uproarious. She described Jonathan Lim, the director, basically trying to herd cats, trying to get them back to doing what they were doing.
I cannot imagine, we talked about all of these great actors, and a lot of them are great actors. We talk about it being an ensemble cast, but you don't have long Hollywood careers if you're not great at what you're doing. And it's not necessarily $10 million a movie, great, but great character actors. That cast, like, that's a room that I'd want to spend a day in.
Oh, yeah.
In 1985. You know what I mean? Like, yes, let me go just hang out for a day or two while they're filming this and see what it was like when the cameras are off, because I can't imagine that all of those people can turn off that personality that quickly.
I wouldn't think so. I would think that, especially if it's legitimate, them just really enjoying each other's company, like, you're right. And you don't want them to turn it off, probably. I'm sure that helps with the cohesion of what they're doing on screen. But apparently in the actual billiard room, they spent a lot of time actually playing pool.
Sure.
In between. And Martin Mull, and I thought this was kind of cool. I'm going to paraphrase this because I don't have the exact quote, but he had said, there's times where you're in movies and you're in with somebody that's famous or somebody you really wanted to work with. But in reality, you get there and maybe it's 2 or 3 or 4 scenes and you don't really see that person that much. He said this movie, because they're basically all in every scene, they spent almost the entire movie together, which is one of the reasons they had such a good time.
Yeah. And it's, it's cool the way that the movie is set up, that it is the whole, let's call it 7 main actors are together almost. There's a little bit where they split up and they're investigating, but most of the movie takes place, they're just in a room together. And I think that you can feel them playing off of each other. And that's what kind of makes it so special, is that you can watch stuff and it's, 1 or 2 actors that have a lot of scenes together and you can tell that they're comfortable together, but to find 6 or 7 people that nobody's outshining anybody, Tim Curry notwithstanding, because I think you use the phrase heavy lifting. He does all of the heavy lifting in this movie. He's driving the narrative the whole time. He's running around and making everybody follow him. But aside from that, I mean, these are all people that are very comfortable acting with each other, and you can tell, and it makes it special.
It definitely comes across. I think that is very well said. Okay, let's actually talk about the movie itself. So just in case anybody has never seen this movie who is listening, I put together just a quick little, description of the setting, and then we can actually talk about the movie, if that makes sense.
Works for me.
In 1954, 6 strangers are summoned to an isolated mansion in New England. Upon arrival, they are welcomed by the butler, Wadsworth, and the maid, Yvette, and each is assigned an alias to keep their identity hidden. Colonel Mustard, Mrs. White, Mrs. Peacock, Mr. Green, Professor Plum, and Miss Scarlet. During dinner, the group realizes they all possess connections to the government. Their host, Mr. Body, who has been blackmailing them, soon joins them. Wadsworth reveals he has contacted the police to have Body arrested, but Body counters by threatening to reveal their secrets if they don't cooperate. He then hands out a set of weapons, a candlestick, rope, lead pipe, wrench, revolver, and dagger, and proposes that someone kill Wadsworth to safeguard their reputation before plunging the room into darkness. Moments later, a gunshot is heard, and when the lights return, body is discovered lying on the floor, apparently dead. Now, what's funny about what I've just read, that's like the first 15 minutes of the movie. Like the exposition is really quite quick, I always
Yeah,
thought.
agreed. It's interesting. There's so many things that happen, and as we talk about like how good of actors everybody are, there's things that always stand out to me. I almost texted you because I saw this in a group. Somebody had made a meme out of a scene from Clue about something completely different. But it was this scene where Tim Curry says, "I'm the butler," and he's asked, "What do you do?" And he says, "I buttle." And that just makes me laugh. Like it's so surreal. Like what a funny way to answer that. And just like thinking about the introduction of all the characters, because yeah, that is all early in the movie, but getting all the characters introduced, everybody coming through the front door to the point of it being an ensemble cast, like as more characters are introduced, the characters themselves are now filling in pieces for the new arrivals instead of Wadsworth doing it. Which is like such a cool thing. Like, oh no, I've heard this right here. Let me do this. I've heard this spiel already.
Mm-hmm.
Let me step in and just tell you why we're all here. So yeah, a lot of cool things happen very quickly, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think that's fine. I think for other movies, it would be like, okay, we're really just jumping in here with both feet. But even in the first few minutes, and I have to admit, I'm a sucker for, I guess, what I'll call older movies now, but even movies from like the 50s and 60s, anything with storm clouds and fake thunder and lightning, I
Yeah.
always find that to be entertaining. And in the beginning of this movie, I'd forgotten when they're showing the beginning credits, it's literally storm clouds a brewing. Like
Yeah.
it's kind of very literal. And they go through with the pouring rain, the evil looking mansion, which I love how that looks as well, because
Yeah.
clearly it's not the real mansion, but it just has enough. I don't know, just the imagery they're putting up there. I don't know whether it's just a piece of art that they're filming. I'd have to admit I don't know how that stuff was made back then, but I always like that the gargoyles on the top of the mansion as the
Yeah.
car pulls up, looking down, and then a minute later, Wadsworth steps in dog poop, and he's wiping it off, and that becomes a gag going on for the next 2 or 3 minutes of people coming in, like
Everybody coming in, like checking their shoes and
it's like, hey, here is the part just in case you were unsure. This is a comedy.
yeah. It's funny as you're talking about like everybody entering the home and all the different vehicles showing up. I don't know if you learned this in your research. All of the cars are the correct colors of the pieces from the game for the people that arrive in them.
Which I thought I did read that, but one of the things that threw me off because I didn't look at that bit of information afterwards is Professor Plum picks up Miss Scarlet and they come in the same car. So I guess my question
her
is,
car is broken down. She gets out of a red broken down car.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But yeah, like to your point of how do you make a board game into a movie, that's a thing that had you been paying attention, and somebody clearly was. I don't think I recognized it until I read it, and now it'll stick with me. You know what I mean? So
Oh yeah, and that's something I'm not that observant. Like there are people who are watching movies that can actively try to figure out what's happening. I'm just there watching. I'm not somebody who has that skill set.
I'm with you.
I do like since you mentioned the cars that Plum and Skylar come up and he stops and she's like, "Why is the car stop?" And he's like, "It's frightened." I thought that was a good line, especially
Yeah, there's a lot of really just funny dialogue throughout the movie. Yeah.
And I might as well go to that now because the dialogue at some point seems almost, and this might be a little bit strong, but it almost seems like airplane-esque. There's just these jokes within the words themselves.
Yeah.
And there was one in particular I liked. I actually wrote it down. Yeah. It's Mrs. White talking about one of her ex-husbands who are no longer with her. She says, "He didn't seem to like me very much. He had threatened to kill me in public," to which Miss Scarlett says, why would he want to kill you in public? And then Wadsworth goes, I think she meant he threatened to, in public, to kill her. It's kind of like,
yeah, like, but yeah, I think that again, when you get people that are very clearly comfortable with each other, that's a line that's probably not as funny with a different cast, or it doesn't even make the script. You know what I mean? And some of the things that get said in this movie were unscripted. Famously, I'm going to say one of the things that gets said in this movie was unscripted, and kind of you get genuine reactions from some of the actors when they hear it.
And why you go? Because that is something I was talking about. What is that unscripted moment?
So when Madeline Kahn talks about flames on the side of my face, which is my favorite, that is my favorite line from the movie. And every time I say it, I don't like to use the word hysterical, but that is close to where I get like uncomfortable time breathing. I'm laughing so hard every time I watch her deliver that. Like that is very much a clip of a movie that I can watch to like get me out of a bad mood. Because it very much is, nobody but Madeline Kahn could have pulled that off, in my opinion. It reminds me of her in Young Frankenstein. It reminds me of her in Blazing Saddles for sure. Yeah, this is very much something that Madeline Kahn would have said. Forget the character. Only Madeline Kahn could have, evoked that reaction from me with that line.
Absolutely. And that is one of the things I read, that Jonathan Lynn, the director and screenwriter before that, was very much clear. These are the words you're supposed to say, but it seemed like in that case, he had no choice. Like she ad-libbed, and they tried it. And like you said, you can see it in people. It's a different reaction.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is such a great line. That's for sure. One of the things you had mentioned is when everybody's entering the house, I think it does a really good job, the movie that is, within probably less than a minute, giving you a good idea of who each character is, like kind of at least their personality, where Colonel Mustard comes in kind of authoritative, almost like he wants to take command.
Yeah.
Mrs. White just kind of comes in untrusting, clearly has something to hide. When Professor Plum comes in, he sees a vet and you can tell he's a creep pretty quickly. Like even when they're in the car, like
right.
You can tell a little bit about each character.
Yeah.
Which I like that, because at the pace they were moving, where clearly the thinking was, we need to put in enough information about the actual mystery. We got to get through these characters quickly, which I think that can go awry. I don't think that happened at all here.
Yeah, I agree. There's something about the scene in the dining room, even, once everybody's there, and just the people in the room trying to figure out, don't I know you? You know what I mean? Like there's a lot going on very quickly, and yeah, it's great.
Yeah, and that dining room scene is awkward, even to watch. And I think a lot of that has to do with Eileen Brennan as Mrs. Is it Miss or Mrs. Peacock? Mrs.?
I think it's Mrs. Peacock.
That sounds right. Yeah, so let's go with Mrs. here. But other than the fact that her hair is
Mrs.
all weird and she's like looks like a peacock and whatnot, but she plays that so well with kind of like, I'm going to be really pushy and annoying and just everything about the food and why are you here and whatnot. And I'd read a little bit about this, where apparently she was having some struggles of her own before then, where a couple years beforehand, she'd gotten into a bad car accident, got addicted to painkillers, had a stint at Betty Ford Clinic. That Jonathan Lynn said that she really had to push herself. And I love Eileen Brennan. I think she's great.
Yeah, I think that, what really has been interesting, like I hadn't seen it in a few years, and then rewatching it this most recent time, is just catching how much of these actors comes through in these characters. Because you get a lot of actors that are, more method actors, and they're you can't see them, you can just see the character, and that's how they want it. Mm-hmm. A lot of this is almost like dinner theater. It's just like, here are these people that like, oh yeah, I'll play this character for tonight, sure, but really it's just me, Tim Curry, being my genuine hilarious self. But I'll be Wadsworth the butler, sure, I'll guide you through this, or Christopher Lloyd. you a little bit see Doc Brown every once in a while, who I think is just Christopher Lloyd. Like you just catch, and people say that negatively about actors sometimes, where like, oh, they just play themselves over and over and over again. Sometimes that's what you want. I'd watch stuff that had Tim Curry and Madeline Kahn in it all the time if it existed. So yeah, so I think that's a unique thing about this, is that it does feel a little bit like these are people that are in on the joke. They're actors, obviously. This is what they do professionally, but they're playing. They're having fun with it, and that comes across very much throughout the movie.
Yeah, and I don't think that's common.
I agree. Yeah.
Back to the dinner scene, and I figure it's best to kind of just talk about this kind of chronologically.
Sure.
We're not gonna, give everybody the whole movie here, but that dinner scene, that's when we first see Mr. Body. I know we talked pretty few about leaving earlier, but he comes off playing sleazy quite well.
Agreed.
He doesn't have a ton of dialogue. He's not spelling out his whole plan like in so many movies the villain does to kind of get you to believe, wow, this really was an incredible idea, and I don't know why you're telling me all of it.
Right.
It's the look of, I think it's everything from his clothes, the slick back hair to, he really presents himself as like, man, this guy is an overall, I don't want to say evil, but just bad guy.
No, but what a scumbag. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much. He just seems kind of scummy and gives you like a target. Everybody can hate this guy. Because up until that point, what are we really doing here? So I think that was a good focal point for, oh yeah, this guy's easy to hate. And there are actors that or people in other stuff where they're doing a good job because nobody likes them. Like,
there is a part that throws me off. So they've gone through dinner and they've kind of figured out, okay, we're going to need to get the whole story, and Wadsworth is calming everything down, and they're going to go have a drink. But when they get to that part of the movie, it always threw me off. And even when I watch it now, because you think, okay, Body's in charge. But then it switches for some manner of moments because Wadsworth takes over, and then you've got Body going, wait, we should all just leave right now.
Right.
And you're like, wait a second. And then he's trying to escape, but Wadsworth has locked them all in. I don't know why. I think that was a good disruption to what I thought was the direction of the movie. I can't really explain it in words. I don't know if you can or if you feel the same way, but I always thought that was kind of cool because even when I rewatched it, I'd forgotten how much of a knee jerk it was a different direction.
What I really like about the movie is even on multiple rewatches, even seeing all the endings, I go back and forth on if I think Wadsworth is in control the whole time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Even though he works for Mr. Body. Yeah, sometimes I watch it and I'm like, oh, he's known all along that he's going to get put in this position where Body's going to try to double cross him, and how does he get out of it? And sometimes I'm like, nope, he buttles, and he was just fast on his feet, and it worked out. But yeah, it's very interesting, and even because of the multiple endings, so you can see sort of the thought process of like, oh, this is how we got to this ending versus how we got to this other ending. In all of those cases, Wadsworth is the only person that is prominent in all of them.
That's very true. And now that you say that, the fourth ending, which was actually filmed, do you know what actually happened in the fourth ending?
So I just learned about it, and I couldn't get a good sense of what the fourth ending was. Although, actually, now that I just said that, is the fourth ending that Wadsworth just kills everybody?
Yeah, and then apparently, because they thought it just didn't fit, and apparently how his ending, I don't know if he's killed, but he escapes to go get into like a car, and the dogs that were kind of keeping them in there are set upon him, or they escape, and that's how he either gets arrested or comes to his demise.
Yeah, it is very fascinating. I know that it's kind of gimmicky, but I think though the multiple ending angle is why the movies resonated with me for so long. And that had I just seen one of the endings, I think I would have been happy. Like, I've only ever watched it where I see all three endings, but I think if I'd only just seen one of them, I would have been like, okay, yeah, fine, that movie ended fine.
I think you're right. It's almost as if they didn't know what they had, And we'll talk about this in the reception a little bit, where I don't think it's good that the movie failed and failed strong, but you know what I mean? At the box office, it did not do what it was meant to do. But you kind of wonder, if it hadn't have taken that sort of fall, would it be what it is today? It certainly wouldn't be the same thing. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be bigger. Maybe it would have been bigger. It probably would have been if it hit on all cylinders or they had just done it that way. But it is kind of interesting when you put it that way. Like if it had just been one ending, even if it was your top ending on the three, it wouldn't have been the same movie by a long shot.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. One of my other favorite scenes in the movie is, and it's certainly intentionally melodramatic, is the reveal, and I guess it's in the study. I think it's in the study, where everybody opens up their gifts and it has the weapons. Just the looking at it and just the confused or kind of half shocked. Like, I still love that scene, having each one of them with the music, just foreboding and everything.
Yeah.
Love that scene.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think that I think there's a lot of things that I love about this movie. I think that those scenes in the study, you know, getting the weapons, Body showing up, after Body dies, them all sort of being more honest about why they're there. Like as that unfolds, you know, the beginning of the movie, when you were saying earlier, you know, it starts with storm clouds and there's some sense of nostalgia from watching older movies that have that. The first 15 minutes or 20 minutes of this movie, I think it's hard to know where it's going to end up. You know what I mean? And then basically there's this, like, after that scene, and that to me is like, okay, yeah, this is the board game Clue. Here are all the weapons. You're in the mansion already. We've already seen all the names. Like that's the missing piece for me of like, okay, yes, we're very much just here's Clue on a big screen, and it going from Clue, which is this like deduction murder mystery game, to all of a sudden close to slapstick comedy for an hour after that. It's such a cool right turn of like, if it had just been a series, if this was Murder on the Orient Express but in a mansion, I don't know if I like this movie as much. But because they did what they did, that's part of what made it so special.
I agree. Like, there was ways to do this where they could have, I mean, there weren't other movies necessarily like that. Like, there are other movies that were murder mysteries that were comedies before us. Like, I remember a movie from the 70s with Alec Guinness, Peter Sellers. It's called Murder by Death. It's not like this has been done before, but this one still has a different feel. And you touched on something there where there's two, and maybe this is just how it is in every comedy. There's one-liners and gags. That's the one part of the comedy in this. And then, as you said, from the middle on, there's a lot more physical comedy. So a couple of the gags that certainly are occurring in this, there's the one with somebody's talking and it's something like a long story short, and everybody else goes, too late. That happens at least twice in the movie where, it's kind of an old joke, but it still plays well.
Sure.
And I think there's another part in the movie, or at least where this happens twice, where somebody went out when there's mass confusion going on and somebody's about to explain and the explanation just isn't enough. And somebody goes, one thing I don't understand. And then everybody says in unison, one thing.
Right.
Where they shouldn't work, but they do.
Yeah. And also, you know, the physical comedy beats that happen, you know, I think about the chandelier falling. I think about the scene where the cop is looking in and you have somebody making out with a dead body and they've like rigged up an arm to be moved on a string. Like, and you're going, in what world does this actually fly? But, you know, it's why we like movies, because, you know, you get away with stuff like this. And yeah, just, you know, them splitting up and all of the funny things that happen. I always think about Wadsworth thinking he's turning a doorknob and turning the shower on. Just like, yeah.
Because you're right. Like, how would that ever work? As if there wouldn't be a lip he has to go over to, like, to step into the actual shower and just
right.
But the way it's played and the tone it sets, it seems to work. Because even when you're talking about when Martin Mull is, I think it was the cook. Yeah, I think he's making out with. He's got his one hand on her forehead, and I'd only noticed recently he's opening her eyes. Where it's absurd, but I'm sure if you watched it and you're one of those people who like loves those videos on YouTube, everything wrong with this movie, you could have
Yeah,
a field day with it.
sure.
But that's not how I look at this movie, where I'm just like, yeah, it's ridiculous, but it's fine.
I think it all fits together for sure.
One of the other things I was thinking about, like watching the movie, is which I think it's not necessarily funny lines or just the physical comedy, but just how normal having murders in the house becomes.
Yeah,
With
because how many people die? And they're just
yeah,
like, all right, well, put this body with the other body, I guess.
exactly. Because at first they're kind of careful, and this is all awful. You know, this person's dead. How did this happen? Then
Right.
later they're just dropping bodies. At some point, I think it's Colonel Mustard because he's taking charge. He's like, put the corpses on the sofa.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Like it just
Um,
keeps going, gets bigger and bigger, but
yeah, and like
means less and less.
right, as the circumstances change, you clearly see people being compromised and deciding what's too far changes very drastically as the movie goes on.
Like there are a couple other lines in there. I don't remember exactly, but at one point, Mustard stops at one of the or well, I guess it's the study again, and they're like, "What?" He's like, "Just checking. Two bodies. We're fine."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think it just does different things. It's not just a one-trick pony. When it does get into one, I think it is over the top at times, but it still pulls it off. But the physical comedy, like some of the collisions in the hallway, like people are flying, like
Yeah.
bodies are flying, and clearly, I put this to you before because I've certainly seen plenty of shows or movies with physical comedy. Like when I think physical comedy, I'm always thinking Three Stooges.
Yep.
That's just, might be the epitome of that. But for you, beyond the Three Stooges, what do you think of for physical comedy? What is a movie that may rival this and how much it relies on it?
I don't know if it rivals it, but it is a movie that I think of in a very similar way, where it's this perfect combination of really funny people, really good dialogue sometimes, and then really funny physical comedy. Like when the physical comedy comes, it's perfectly timed. Monty Python: The Holy Grail, to
Oh,
me,
okay.
sits at like the, if I ever hear horses, I think of coconuts as a 41-year-old man. I can't think about horses galloping without thinking about somebody skipping, hitting coconuts together. I think about the scene with the Black Knight losing multiple limbs and still screaming with four bloody stumps, and the scene with the rabbit. Like there's just so many, it's not the whole movie, but when it happens, it's always perfect. When the French are throwing things out of the castle, like it's just, there are perfect beats, and it's not the same amount of physical comedy as Clue, but I think it serves a similar purpose where it's breaking up some of the other surreal things that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think about that. I a little bit think about Home Alone, only because that was probably my first real exposure to, hey, getting hit with things can be really funny, because I was probably the target audience for that movie when it came out. And seeing somebody that was basically my age at that time beating up adults with paint cans was hilarious and, terrifying as an adult watching it. But as a kid, you're like, oh, this is hilarious. I can't believe that he burned his hair off, or, so that they're sort of the two that I kind of go to for physical comedy.
Well, it's funny. I was going to go with Home Alone as well, just because it's not like the whole movie relies on physical humor. That would not be the case at all. But you're right. When whatever they are, the wet bandits are trying to
Yeah.
get in the house, it is just all physical comedy and faces being contorted, screaming and yelling. There is that one scene though, where I think it's Daniel Stern's character is now barefoot, and he's like stepping on that nail. Where I
Yeah.
know it doesn't really show anything super vivid or detailed, but I'm just like, oh my
Yeah.
God. It
Still,
just,
just thinking about that, I got the heebie-jeebies thinking about stepping on a nail with my bare feet. So, yeah.
it is visceral.
Yeah.
For sure.
Agreed.
When you think about this movie, what are some other things that are worth mentioning here? There's certainly other lines I'm sure I'm missing. What are some of the other things that makes this movie just special?
I think, we've talked about the ensemble cast, even the non-major players. I'm trying to think. I always forget this actor's name. Oh, Howard Heisman being in it and uncredited. And also that the singing telegram girl is one of the members of the Go-Go's. Like there were just so many cool things that they kind of shoved into this movie. And yeah, I think about how I can just rewatch it. Like it's just as enjoyable every time I watch it. And I find that I like a different ending more every time I watch it, which I think is cool. Like if I'm paying attention to different things, once I get to the end and you see all three endings, one of them resonates more based off of what I was paying attention to in the rest of the movie, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense because now that I've looked up more about this movie than ever, there's certain things the next time I see it, I am going to look for because
Exactly.
like I didn't realize that throughout the movie, the paintings that are on the wall, some percentage of them are, I think they're dead presidents or something like that.
Oh, that's cool.
Every time I watch it now, I'm going to see it a bit differently. Like another thing I saw was when the cook had a TV on when she was cooking dinner. She was watching the McCarthy congressional
Yeah.
testimony. So things like that, that it's not like I was oblivious to it, but now I'm like, oh, I'm putting pieces together that I didn't put together before.
Speaking of putting things together, I am remiss because I left out probably my favorite line from the movie that I would say comes up in my regular life at least once a month. My wife and I will say 1+2+1+1 to each other entirely too often. But that's just like that to me for so long was like the thing that I took away from this movie was just Wadsworth trying to count bullets and doing such a bad job. And then there being a shot fired where there's another bullet. And it's just like, it's so perfect that they took so long, like so much counting to then just say like, fine, we'll just fire the last shot and see if something happens.
Well, I was hoping, like, because I knew that would come up. I wasn't sure if it would come up earlier, but that's what I wanted to ask. Yeah, anything else out there? Because I know you've said that to me before, where
Yeah.
there are these like super memorable lines. Even the last line of the movie where Mr. Green, who's already admitted he's a homosexual, he's like announces, I'm going to go home and sleep with my wife.
Yeah.
Just to make sure that everybody knows he's okay and he's, no need to call, Congress about his
Right.
what he said earlier where yeah, there's a lot of really good lines from the movie that just you would never think, because we'll talk about in a moment of how poorly it did at the theater,
Yeah.
that these should still be in. But I think that is just a credit to how it was made, but also kind of a pointing out how poorly the marketing of the movie was.
One last one because it's both a funny line and good physical comedy. Let us in, let us in, let us out, let us out. It's just like peak for this movie of just like nobody knows what the hell is going on for most of the film.
The amount of lines that are announced like that in unison, where there's like 2, 3, 4. Hey, by the way, all of you have to say this line at the same
Right.
time. I can't think of many movies off the top of my head where that is happening, unless
Yeah.
they're singing.
Exactly. Yeah, short of musicals, this is where we're at.
Clearly, we think Clue has been underappreciated, at least back then.
Agreed.
And I think we're going to find out why here. You alluded to it earlier that it didn't do well at the box office. So per Box Office Mojo, the amount it did at the box office was $14,643,997 on a budget of $15 million. Neither you nor I are movie executives, but I feel pretty confident that is not what they were going for here.
Agreed.
We've certainly discussed how the marketing for the movie certainly didn't help. It was a bit convoluted. Maybe there was a small percentage of people that would have been willing to see it multiple times, but it just was not the best laid out plan for getting this movie the most exposure, at least the exposure it deserved. So I did take a look into this just to see what the competition was for that movie. And it definitely didn't help. I mentioned earlier in the podcast, Spies Like Us came out a week before. So Clue came out December 13th, 1985. A lot of movies come out during the Christmas season in between Thanksgiving and Christmas. Spies Like Us came out a week earlier. That did really solid. Some other big movies that came out within a week or two of it. Jewel of the Nile came out December 11th. The Color Purple, December 16th. Enemy Mine, which wasn't big. It was sci-fi. I don't know how much competition that gives a movie like Clue. But we had a Chorus Line that came out on December 13th, the same as Clue. Santa Claus, the movie, came out November 27th. That did pretty much okay in the theater. Murphy's Romance. So I wouldn't say it's the biggest movies all time, but there was plenty of competition there. But what may have been one of the bigger ones, at least for younger viewers, was Rocky IV was released on November 27th. And that was a huge movie. So
Yeah.
Clue did have some big competition. I don't know if you're seeing any movies there and you're just like, oh, yeah, that would cause problems. But I definitely don't think this was, and it certainly proved not to be, a walk in the park.
Yeah, for sure. I think that definitely hurts it. Again, because we talked about what the movie-going experience would have been like in the 80s. Probably limited the amount of screens that it got shown on because there weren't multiplexes like there are now, where, to your point, there were 2 movie theaters that had 2 screens each. If Clue was on one of them, maybe any of those other movies aren't, and that probably wasn't happening. So I think that definitely led into it. Ultimately, the more I think about this, ultimately, this is a movie that got released probably 15 years too early to be successful.
That may be true.
But
at least
you
successful
lose,
the way they would have liked to have been
right?
Successful.
But you lose, all of these actors probably at that time in their careers to be in it. So who knows what happens?
Yeah, it doesn't play the same for sure. Here's a question for you. 1985, I know you're too young, but I don't know if it's that much different when you're a younger kid in the 90s, where I do remember at least a handful of times in my young life just going to the movie theater. We obviously didn't have internet, we didn't have cell phones or anything like that, where unless you had a newspaper, because I think this is before even movie phone existed, before Seinfeld put so much attention on it, where you could even call in unless you knew the number for the movie theater. I don't know exactly how we figured out what movies were playing, but I do remember multiple times, either my parents or even when I was a little bit older and was able to drive, sometimes just going to the movie theater, not knowing what was playing, not knowing the timing. So you did that as well.
Yep. I would just show up. There was a movie theater pretty close to the comic book store that I hung out in high school and later worked at. And we would just get on the bus, get up there, go to the comic book store, and then walk to the movie theater and see if there's anything playing that we wanted to see. And I probably saw a bunch of terrible movies in the theater because it was like $3 or $4 to get in. I certainly had that in my pocket. Now I have to think about, I only going to the movies is like, okay, does this work for my schedule? Is this something that I actually want to go somewhere else for 2.5 hours to see? And the movie theater's 6 minutes from my house. So
I'd love to know how much of an impact that had on people, because I'm glad to hear, even though you're a little bit younger than me, that you were doing something similar. But
yeah,
I would imagine, and I know this at least for myself, if me and my buddies went to the Granite Run Mall when they had a movie theater there, well, and a mall there, and we walked over there, or if we drove there just not sure what to do because the mall was closing at 9:30 or 10 o'clock or something like that, I don't know how many times we decided, hey, we're here, let's just pick a movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, how many times do we go, screw it, let's drive 20 minutes back to Westchester?
Yeah, it was definitely different. So I think that all of those things probably impacted how it was received.
I know there's no specific numbers about, hey, how many people actually chose movies that they really weren't looking forward to seeing. I would love to know that, because it must have been happening way more back then, where now you have all the information in the world. You can decide whether the trip's worth it, or just go, oh, you know what? I'll just see it here instead, 5 minutes down the road at this other movie theater.
Yeah.
It just kind of popped in my head there. So we know, at least from the economics of it, not successful. We have a couple reasons we think why that happened, but it was panned by critics as well. You can go through and you can find a whole bunch of reviews, or just, even if they don't have the full review, if you go on like Rotten Tomatoes or something like that, there's enough of it to see whether they liked it or not. And there was 2 critics' comments that probably were pretty common. I think this was just one of the better worded ones. Roger Ebert, who certainly knows how to low bridge a movie if he doesn't like it. Why doesn't the studio abandon this ridiculous multiple ending scheme and show all 3 endings at every theater? So he figured out immediately that this was not the way to do it. And he used the word scheme, which
Yeah.
I'll come back to in a second. And I think the other one was from Siskel. I thought I noted it here, but either he or Siskel, Gene Siskel, said this movie needed 3 different middles rather than 3 different endings. I thought that was clever.
Yeah.
I guess when it comes to that scheme portion, I get it. Clearly, the movie theater, and maybe even Landis to some degree, like he's getting a percentage, even though he wasn't the director anymore. He was, I think, an executive producer. There's money to be made here the more
Sure.
people go to see your movie. But I guess I don't like it so much because my opinion, I've never been on a movie set or anything like that, but from everything I've read about Jonathan Lynn, the director, and the players in the movie, the Martin Mulls, the Madeline Kahns, I don't think any of that made any difference to them. They acted their heart out. They put in the amount of writing, the amount of like the set design I thought was great. We didn't really touch on that. It looked like some parts were eerie, some parts were ornate. If I didn't know about the marketing scheme, as he's kind of putting it here, I don't think I would think any differently of it. Like, I think that's one of the reasons after it gotten past that, maybe people could see past that, maybe quote unquote awful idea of how they presented the movie, because the people who actually made the movie didn't know or really care about how it was going to be marketed. They just went out and tried to make a good movie.
Yeah, I think it definitely suffered from that. And, we've touched on it a few times, but they probably should have just shown it like you see it now on streaming or when you would have watched it at home. Here's all 3 endings. It's funny enough how they cut them together that it would have worked. Maybe you get more people go see it again, or more people tell other people to go see it. You had mentioned your dad would have been like, I'm not going to 3 theaters to try to see 3 different endings. You probably get more of that crowd that'll say, yeah, I'll go see it because, somebody told me that it was good and all 3 endings make sense. I've never seen anything like that before.
It just would have been perceived differently. And especially back then, like, I don't know at your age, whether Roger Ebert and Gene Siskel, whether they were as big as they were when I was a kid, but they had I think it was a Saturday night at like 7 o'clock or 7:30 show,
Yep.
where it was just a half an hour of them, movies they liked, movies they didn't like, the movies they hated, and they carried weight with them, where other than the fact of the logistics of going to see these movies at different theaters, it really probably was a pretty big problem that you had reviewers going, they're just trying to rip you off and make you see this more than necessary, where that must have low bridged it.
For sure. Yeah, I think that's probably the case because, again, like you're talking about trusted people in the industry that are telling you, using words like scheme, it probably turned people off. Whereas now there's so many people with a platform that you can hear one person say it's a scheme, and then you can hear a podcast about why this movie from 40 years ago was so great, and it changes your mind because there's more opinions available now.
Yeah, and we're one of those podcasts. That's the sense of purpose we have going on right now. So I think we've touched on a whole bunch of different things here, but I think there is one thing more we should definitely talk about before we get to why this movie matters. But there are a few examples of TV shows and movies playing homage to Clue. Any favorites for you?
Psych.
And I knew that was going to be it, and I'd be the same. Take it away. What is so good about that episode of Psych?
I think that it's mostly that Psych is one of my favorite shows already.
Can you tell us a little bit about Psych, just
sure,
in case somebody hasn't watched it before?
Psych's a show about a aimless person whose father was a police officer, and he is maybe one of the most observant people ever. And he uses his powers of observation and deduction to fool a police department into thinking that he's a psychic detective. And then he starts solving crimes as a, quote, psychic detective. And if you haven't watched Psych, you should go do that. But what's cool to me about what they did is that there are elements of Psych that kind of remind me of Clue. There is good physical comedy. There's people in a room together that play off of each other pretty well because it is that whodunit format a lot. You can tell that it was one of the influences on the show in a lot of cases. But what's cool is the episode where Psych plays homage to Clue was the 100th episode of Psych. And they brought 3 of the actors from Clue were in the episode. So Leslie Ann Warren was in it, Christopher Lloyd was in it, Martin Mull was in it. Tim Curry probably would have been in it, but he had been in an earlier episode of Psych. So it's just they do a really good job of it's not a parody. It's not, oh, hey, we're doing this Clue episode necessarily, but there are a lot of really cool callbacks to Clue in that episode.
I could not say it better myself. And if anybody has not seen Psych, you should. I caught it late. I did not see it because I think it started in like 2007 or something like that. I think it was 6 or 7 seasons. My wife and I loved it, but just like this podcast, if you like 80s references, they're jamming them in at times where for me, you'd hardly ever be able to annoy me with an 80s reference, but they just fit things in so well because the two main characters are from that age as well.
Yep.
But yeah, it's just so well done, that episode in relation to Clue, that you would imagine that when they said, hey, by the way, when we're doing this episode, we're going to do an episode based on Clue, you would imagine the actors playing the characters were pretty gleeful, kind of like, this is going to be awesome. Like,
this is amazing.
Yeah.
What else could we ask for? Yeah.
This is why I do what I do.
Exactly
right.
I
could do something like that. Because even, I know we don't have video for the podcast here, but I can see you. Just your face just kind of got a little bit brighter because you're talking about that. And yeah, that would have been my example as well. Okay, Fran, like the end of every episode I do here, we have to figure out, why does this movie matter? Why don't you go first?
You know, it's interesting because we've spent a decent amount of time today talking about it. And the more I think about it, I don't think that it does. I think that it's not that special of a movie. I think that it sort of caught me up in the multiple endings and being a Tim Curry fan more than anything. I don't really care about the rest of the cast. I think the jokes are just okay. Yeah, I think that maybe it doesn't hold up as well as I think it does.
It's funny because I kind of was worried that I was feeling the same way, but I'm clear the podcast has been how great it was. But this has now been one of those conversations where I've kind of talked myself out of it. And I think with the help of you, where I'm just kind of like, this doesn't seem like the best use of my time. And I didn't want to speak for you or anything like that, where this movie, it's a little bit schlock. And yeah, I'm sorry that you probably could have done better with your Saturday afternoon.
I mean, I've done worse things, so
okay,
it's fine. I'll get over it.
Well, I think we should stop making this mistake and just call it.
Sounds good.
All right. That is how it could have happened. But here is how it really happened. Why does this movie matter? Why don't you go first? Why does Clue matter?
I think for me, it was so unique for what it was trying to do for a lot of reasons. You know, it was the first thing ever based on a board game. It had the multiple endings. It was truly an ensemble cast where, even based off of the marketing, like you've talked about, I don't know if I would have gone into that movie thinking, oh, this is a comedy. So there's just a lot, but ultimately, you know, we're 40 years on. It takes place in an era that was well before my time, before your time, and it still resonates. It's still hilarious. You know, the gags are still funny. There's nothing that's aged really poorly in it, and I find that a lot with stuff that other stuff that I've watched from the 80s, where I remember watching it 20 years ago even and being like, oh man, I love this. And then watching it now and going, ooh, this is not quite what I remember it being like. But yeah, Clue is just one of those things where there's nothing really in there where I'm like, oh, this is cringy, or I can't believe that they got away with this. It's just funny and well done.
I think that makes perfect sense. This movie just holds. Even though it's from the 50s, made in the 80s, but the themes, the sensibilities, there's nothing there that you're right. It's not something you're gonna be like, oh my God, like you're looking at a car crash, or like, how is this ever successful? Like,
right.
It's not like that at all. I tend to agree. And for me, it's part of what you said, and I hinted at this earlier in the podcast. I'm a big fan of actors who aren't A-list stars. They're and this isn't my wording, it's some cliche, they're the glue to a movie.
Sure.
And there's so many good ones, like from our lifetimes, like Stanley Tucci or John Goodman. Like, these are people that they're not leading that many movies, but you know, if they're in a movie, they're going to be really solid.
It's going to be great. I'm just going to add to your list that John C. Reilly is that for me.
Absolutely. Like he's had a couple movies where he's been the lead, but they're just dependable.
Yep.
And they are that glue. If you don't have a good supporting actors and actresses, like on the actress side, I'd go with like Diane Wiest or Lynn Thigpen. Like they're just trustworthy. Like they make smaller roles that much more memorable. And once again, being Hades podcast, I certainly am a big fan of the likes of Lance Henriksen, Emmett Walsh, where they were just stalwarts in so many movies. And I guess this movie, like you had said earlier, it's the definition of an ensemble cast to me. None of these people were superstars. None of them were has-beens either. They are just a group of true actors, hardworking, coming together. And I think it was important that they came together in a Hollywood staple like a murder mystery. There's been a ton of murder mysteries, but they came together.
This. Yeah,
exactly. And it just gelled so well. It's just a wonderful movie to watch, not because you're looking to rack your brain or really concentrate, but just it feels good. And that's certainly what makes this movie special to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Fran, thanks so much for spending the time with me here, taking the time, because this is a movie I was definitely excited about when you and I talked about this and found out how much you liked it. It just made it that much more interesting of a conversation. So
yeah, I really appreciate you having me on.
No, I'm sure it'll happen again because I think we have similar sentiments here because this is a special sort of movie. But yeah, thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of Another 80s Podcast. As always, thanks to Full Boy Media for producing the theme music for Another 80s Podcast. I hope to catch you on the next episode where we tackle one of the more important and impactful topics of the 80s. That's right, we're going to be talking about the McDonald's McDLT. You know, keep the hot side hot and the cool side cool. That weird styrofoam container with 2 compartments. Seriously, who else in the podcast game is taking on the real issues? Come on, son. That's a psych reference. Well, I hope to catch you on the next episode. Thanks for rewinding with me.